It would help if I turn my mic on. Hey, what's up, everybody? Hey, I'm so glad you guys decided to be here tonight and join us for Inside Out. How many of you guys are having a great weekend so far? You making, making it? Ooh, okay, all right. Summer's kind of worn off. The excitement of it is here. I'm so glad you decided to join us here for week 2 of our series that we're calling Choosing Your Future. How many of you guys, sometime in the year 2021, so either in the past 5 or 6 months or in the next 6 or 7 months, how many of you guys are going to be turning 16 and getting your driver's license? Let me see a show of hands. 16, you are 16, you're going to be turning 16. A few of you, cool. I started thinking about the year that I turned 16, and I made a deal with my dad. I told my dad, when I turn 16, I really want to drive, I want to have a car, I want to be able to get to school, get to basketball practice and do those kind of things. And I was the oldest, so I had a little brother. And so, as you learn how to do, I began to negotiate and make a deal. Like, I'll take my brother to school and I'll pick him up from soccer practice and I will be an asset for you if you'll just let me get a car. And so my dad struck up this deal with me. He said, all right, I'll tell you what, I'll go in half with you. Like, I'll pay for half the car and you'll pay for half the car. And I was like, all right, that sounds doable. So I got a job leading up to the summer before I turned 16 so that I could pay for my half of the car. And guys, it was a slick 2001 Mitsubishi Montero Sport. Throw that picture up here. Boy, I tell you what, I was cruising around the high school in that bad boy. Now, this isn't my actual car because we didn't have color photos back then, but it is an exact replica of the car that I had in high school. And guys, let me tell you what, day like today, beautiful sunny afternoon, I'd have that sunroof open, cruising around with my windows down, and I was the king of the world. I loved this car. Guys, I'm not just like hamming this up for on stage. I loved this car. And I know y'all look at it and you'd be like, that's not a cool car. I know it's not a cool car, okay? I loved it though. This was all the rage in the early 2000s. I put like a speaker system in it with like subwoofers in the back so that like my friends could hear me coming down the block. Like, I was one of those guys, I invested a lot of my money and my time in high school into making this thing as cool as it could possibly be. I drove this car for 10 years and for almost 200,000 miles before it finally died on me. Like, when I tell you that I cared a lot about this car, it is not for show on stage. Like, I loved my 2001 Mitsubishi Montero Sport limited edition with the leather seats and the sun. I mean, this thing was nice, y'all. It was awesome. And what I learned in that process, and this was probably the lesson that my dad wanted me to learn in saying, okay, what I'll do is I'll go in halfsies with you, is I learned a very valuable lesson about this car. And it's this right here. It's that when something is yours, it becomes immediately more important to you than something that is not yours. When something is yours and you actually own it and you have some skin in the game, it becomes infinitely more important and immediately more important than something that's not yours. Like, before I got that car, my dad would be like, here, you can drive my truck to the store. Your mom needs eggs. She's cooking something, whatever. And I'd be like, all right, fine. I get my dad's truck, and I'm like, it stinks in here. I hate this truck, and it was just kind of like, it was a truck, and I would get it, and come back and be like, Dad, your truck needs washing, and it's not clean, and it's really old, and it smells like old people in there, and like, you should, like, get an I bought you an air freshener while I was in there. Like, it was one of those things, like, I just didn't really care about it. But when I got my car, it was like every Saturday morning, I was out there like, washing it out. Guys, I had never waxed a car before, but you can really make those things shine if you know what you're doing. And so, like, if you guys are turning 16 this year, you need some help for the low price of a lot of money, I will come to your house and I will teach you how to do that, because I'm telling you, I took immaculate care of this car because it was mine. Like, I had some skin in the game. Like, I had paid for it and I had bought it. And I realized that when you own something, when it's yours, it's way more valuable to you. It's way more important to you than something that's not. And so if you were here last week, we talked a lot about, hey, the people that you do life with, the people that you go through high school with really will shape the decisions that you make and shape your experience in high school and ultimately the rest of your life. And today we're kind of continuing that same idea in that it's not just the people that you go through life with, but it's also the things that you base your life around will also shape the future of your life. And so essentially today, kind of where I'm going with this is that one of my desires and one of the things I want for you guys to figure out while you're in your high school years is I want your faith to become something that you own during high school. It's something that uniquely belongs to you and that you own it. And I think that that is very important for you to do at this stage in your life because I do believe that it shapes every stage of life after this. And here's what I mean by that. When you own something, it becomes yours and you get to kind of take care of it and you get to have responsibility over it and you kind of get to shape how it affects your life and what you do with it. But a lot of times we treat our faith not like something we own, but like something that we use. In fact, I found that a lot of people take faith as something that is a part of their life, but it's not really essential to their life. But in reality, anything that you put your faith into is something that you're trusting your life with. And I know that as like churches and people who believe in God and that kind of stuff, we take faith and we use it as part of our everyday language. But in all honesty, we have faith in things all the time. Like we have faith in, I use my car as an example. We have faith in like a seatbelt, right? Have you ever thought about the concept of a seatbelt? It's this little strap of leather that goes across your body that's supposed to protect you if you go crashing into another vehicle at 50 miles an hour to keep you in the vehicle. Like it's just a little strip of something and you have total faith in it. Like you put your seatbelt on and be like, boom, now I'm safe. I can do whatever I want. Like I can go as fast as I want, right? That's like the mindset we have is like, I'm wearing my seatbelt, so I'm good. I have trust in this. One of the people on the Inside Out team, Andrea, recently, her and her sister went skydiving. And I think that is, at the same time, fascinating and sounds like a lot of fun, but also terrifying. Like how many of you guys, if you had the opportunity, you would go skydiving, or maybe you've been skydiving? Okay, we have a lot of daredevils in here. That's great. If you go skydiving, you're placing your life in the hands of a parachute. Because if you don't have a parachute or you have a not working properly parachute, you are going to be like an imprint in the ground, like in the cartoons, and they fall off the cliff and they hit the ground and there's like this imprint in the ground. And that's going to be you because you are putting your faith in something that is not yourself, right? You're putting your faith in this parachute to arrive safely to the ground with your body intact, right? At a decent speed, not full speed from the airplane. And so what I've learned is that we place our faith in stuff all the time. But today I want to talk about what does it look like to own our faith and what do we do with our faith? That's the question that I want to ask. What do we do with our faith? Because I think there's several ways that we take this idea of faith and we kind of use it in ways that isn't exactly God's design for what he wants us to do in having faith in him. So I've got 5 ways. You guys, if you've been around here long enough, you know I love numbers and I love systems. So like here's 5 ways that I feel like a lot of times we manipulate our faith into something it's not supposed to be. First one is that we fake it. And you guys know that person, right? There's a lot of people who like, the songs are playing and you're in here in worship and they're, the king of my heart, and they are into it. But then like they walk out of here and their life is not exactly what it was when they were in this room, right? Like when they're in here, they kind of flip on a switch. They put on a show of that, hey, look at this wonderful faith I have. I'm going to be really out with my faith. But then you see them at school or on a Friday night or somewhere out in the world and you're like, not the same person I saw at Inside Out on Sunday, right? Like the actions that they do, the words that they use, the way they treat people maybe doesn't line up with the person that they act like they're here on Sunday morning. And essentially what that is doing is that when we do this, we are often saying, hey, my faith is not in God and my faith is not in who Jesus says I am. My faith is in the approval of the people that I'm trying to win by pretending like I have a deep faith. And so instead of having a deep faith, we just pretend and we fake it. Other people, maybe in this room, you don't fake it, but you do this. The second one is that you borrow it. Like you have somebody in your life that you're close to or somebody that you care about, and they have a deep faith, and that you're hoping that maybe just by like osmosis of being around that person, you can like catch some of that, like it's COVID or something, that if I'm in 6 feet of you, maybe I can get some of that faith. For some of you, that's like, maybe it's your parents, and it's like, well, I grew up in a Christian household, so it passed down, like it's in my genes, right? Like I have faith in my blood, so like I'm gonna be a good Christian. Maybe not today, I don't really feel like it today, but one of these days, my mom's a good Christian person, and my dad loves the Lord, and so like, when I get to be an adult, when I get to be their age, I'll figure it out, right? Or maybe you have a small group leader, and you're like, man, I am like this with my small group leader, and they invest a lot in my life, and one of these days, I'm going to actually like listen to them and do some of the things they tell me to do because it's pretty good advice, and I'll apply that later. Like, and so what we try to do is we try to borrow other people's faith. Instead of having a faith of our own, one that we actually like live out, one that we practice, we try to take faith that other people live out and, kind of like say, hey, I'm just going to be close to that person, and maybe some of their faith will rub off on me. Some people go even a step further, and they don't just borrow it, they try to rent it. If you ever rented something in your life, basically the way rentals work is like, hey, I will pay you money, and you let me use this thing for a little while, and then I'll give it back. That's basically how renting works. If you go to college, you rent an apartment, it's like, hey, I'm going to pay you money, you're going to let me live here while I take classes. When I graduate, I will move out of here, and I will quit paying you money, and this is over. And essentially, that's how we try to treat our faith a lot of times, or at least how we try to treat God. It's like, okay, God, I want all the great things that come with being a follower of Jesus, like the whole forgiveness. I love the grace thing, the unconditional love. Give me a double dose of that. Like, I want all of the wonderful things that comes with having faith, but I feel like I have to earn it. And so what I'm going to do is I tell you what, I'll give up Sundays from 4:30 to 6:30. I'll show up to Inside Out. I'll sit on the floor with my friends. I'll go to a small group. And it's a transactional thing. Like I'll give up my Sunday afternoons. You give me the unconditional love and forgiveness. Like it's a pretty sweet deal. Or maybe some of you are like, I don't think that's enough. Like I'm worried that maybe that payment isn't good enough. And so I'll tell you what, I'll show up on Sunday mornings and I'll volunteer in Upstreet. Or I'll volunteer in Wambaland. Like, I'll hold the crying babies. Like, it doesn't even matter. Like, give me the bad kids. Like, that will actually give me more stars on my sash that God's apparently going to give me in heaven, right? Like, it's this like Boy Scout mentality. Like, hey, if I do enough good things, get enough merit badges from God, then maybe I can, rent this faith for a little while, and God will give me all these things that I want from him. Others still, maybe they don't try to rent it or earn it, but they do this. They try to pick and choose it. They're like, well, I like some of the things about God, like, I really like the love and forgiveness stuff, but the whole like, hey, let me be like Lord over your life and surrendering everything that I have and everything I am into him doesn't sound super awesome to me. So like, I would just like to have like the good, like loving Jesus side of things, but I'm not trying to like wake up early in the morning and like read the Bible. Have you guys ever read Leviticus? Not a good time, right? It is one of those things where I feel like a lot of people are saying, oh, I like this part of faith, or I like this part of Christianity, or maybe even it's faiths outside of Christianity, like, oh, I really like the Hindu belief in this, or like the Buddhist of like clear your mind. Like I'll just kind of pick and choose what I want from my faith, and I'll kind of build a faith of my own. Or maybe the last thing that is you try to do all these things and it doesn't work, and you get to the last thing and you're just like, you know what? I don't know that this is worth it. Maybe I'm just going to be a person who doesn't have faith. Because it's a lot easier than trying to fake it or be around the right people and borrow it or try to do enough right things and rent it or to try to make it my own by picking and choosing what I like from all these different faiths. And you know what? I'm just going to quit while I'm ahead. And I'm just not going to do the faith thing. Maybe that's where some of you guys are walking in here tonight. You're just tired of trying to figure out this faith thing. And what I've learned is that when we do all these 5 things, when we try to walk through all these things, essentially what we're doing is we're placing our faith in things that were never meant to hold up our faith. Again, if faith is centering our lives around something that we believe to be true, we're centering our lives around something that maybe was never meant to hold us up in the first place. Like if you're trying to fake it, you're trying to get someone's approval or get someone to like you or someone to think that you're living your life the right way. But God never called us to get other people's approval. If you're trying to borrow it, you're trying to get someone else's faith. In fact, your faith is in their faith, which is not a faith of your own. It's a faith of someone else's own. And maybe you're trying to rent it, and you're trying to say, all right, God, I'm going to do enough good things that you have to love me. You have to let me into heaven on that day, right? Like I'm going to be good when I get there because I've done enough good things. Or maybe you're trying to make it faith your own and say, hey, I want to be in control of what faith is to me. Or maybe you're just tired and you want to give up. But essentially what we're doing is we're putting our faith in things that were never meant to hold us up in the first place. There's a pastor in New York. He's retired now, but I think he's really smart and really good. His name's Tim Keller, and he says it like this: weak faith in a strong object is infinitely better than strong faith in a weak object. And essentially what he's saying there is that our problem is often that we put our faith in the wrong things. We're putting our faith in things that were never meant to hold us up in the first place. We're putting our faith in things that were never meant to center our lives around in the first place. I used the skydiving analogy a minute ago, and a lot of times if you've been skydiving or maybe you know somebody who's been skydiving, essentially they're putting their faith in this parachute, right? Now, if I had a parachute and I laid it out here on the stage, you would realize that it's really just a big piece of tarp with some strings and rope tied to it. Not really the thing that I'm like, how many of you guys would put your life in this piece of tarp's hands? There's not going to be a lot of hands that go up. You're going to be like, that's just a piece of tarp, man, with some ropes and strings tied to it. I don't know that that's a pretty weak object for me to put the whole totality of my life into its hands. But instead, what people who choose to go skydiving do is they put their faith not in that weak object of a parachute, but they put their faith in a strong object, someone who's trained and knows how to pack that parachute into a backpack, and they know, this is really important, they know the right time to pull the cords so that it opens and you arrive safely to the ground. So if you choose to go skydiving, your faith is not in the parachute, your faith is in the person who packs the parachute. And I think a lot of times in our lives with God, we oftentimes put our faith in the wrong things. We put our faith in putting on a show for people when we come to church. We put our faith in putting the right people in our lives to borrow from their faith. We put our faith in trying to do enough right things for God that God approves of us. We try to put our faith into picking and choosing what we like about God. And instead, what God's saying is, hey, all that is unnecessary. All I want from you is to just put your faith in me, the real me, and the thing that I've done for you. And we see that the Apostle Paul says this in Romans chapter 10, verse 9 and 10. He kind of defines what a real faith in God looks like and what faith in what he did for you through his son Jesus looks like. This is what he says in Romans 10, verses 9 and 10. He says, if you declare with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. He's like, hey, that's what you need for faith in me right there. If you declare with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. For it's with your heart that you believe and are justified, and it is with your mouth that you profess your faith and are saved. And in these two verses, what Paul does is he totally destroys all the things that we put our faith in that aren't worthy of putting our faith in, right? If you're the person who's like, hey, I feel like I've been trying to fake it with my faith, here's the thing. Paul says, if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord, that's easy to do. Anybody can say that, whether you believe it or not. But the next line says, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead. He's like, hey, there's no faking what's in your heart. You could fake, like, how are you today? I'm fine, I'm doing great. And inside you're like, no, I'm not, I'm doing really bad. Like, this is a horrible day. You can fake it, right? But you can't fake what's inside. It's just true. And so Paul says, like, hey, you can't fake it. And the next thing is, he says, hey, you can't borrow it, because he says, if you declare with your mouth. Not if someone else declares with their mouth and you think it sounds good, you're like, I'll just go with them. That works for me too. Like, there's no double tap for the kingdom of God. Like, you can't just say, I like what they posted, I'm just going to repost that. Like, that's not how faith works. You have to have it as your own. If you declare with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, then you will be saved. It's all about you and your life. You can't borrow it from someone else. And then once again, the third one, you can't rent it. He says that if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. It's with your heart that you believe and are justified, and it's with your mouth that you profess your faith and are saved. And then you have to do all these wonderful things for God, and he will accept you. Then you have to have this kind of church attendance, and he will be proud of you. If you serve enough hours, then maybe God will think about letting you in heaven. If you have enough mission trips under your belt, then maybe God will allow you to get, it's 100% an inward faith that you express outwardly. And notice again, he says, if you declare with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, he's like, hey, if you're going to do this, you have to believe that Jesus is who he says he is, that he is Lord over your life. You don't get to pick and choose, well, I like Jesus as a teacher, and I like him as a healer, but I think I'm going to leave out the lordship part. That doesn't really jive with my life. Like, he doesn't give you the opportunity to pick and choose here either. He says, hey, you have to believe that Jesus is who he says he is, and that he did what he came to do in dying on the cross, and that God raised him from the grave. And then you will be saved. And essentially what I feel like Paul's telling us here and what he's teaching us is that where you place your faith determines how you spend your life. Because the temptation's always going to be there to fake it and just to put on a show on Sundays when you show up to church. The temptation's always going to be there just to surround yourself with the right people, and maybe they'll rub off on you and you can get some of their faith in your life. The temptation's always going to be there to do for God instead of trusting in what he's already done for you. The temptation's always going to be there to put your faith in things that were never meant for your life to be centered around. And what I feel like Paul's telling us, and when he says that where you place your faith determines how you spend your life, what he's teaching us in this passage of Romans is one of the most important things that you can begin to understand today. The reason Paul tells us that is that he wants each and every person who reads that passage or who is in the room tonight, he wants you to understand the freedom that comes with placing your faith in someone who was meant to hold your faith. The freedom that comes when placing your faith around something that your life was supposed to be centered around. And that when you put your faith in Jesus and what he did for you on the cross, and that God raised him from the dead, that God is saying, oh, finally, you're getting your life back to the way I designed it to be in the first place. And so as we come together and we talk about this faith thing, it's not just, another message at church about faith. No, it's another message about how God designed you and who he called you to be and the life that he's inviting you to by putting your faith in his hands. Because he designed you for exactly that. God never meant you to have to fake it. He wants to set you free from that. God never meant you to have to borrow it from somebody else. He wants to set you free from that. God never designed for you to have to rent it or earn it. No, that's why he sent Jesus, because you can't rent it. You can't earn it. God never designed for you to pick and choose, because he said, hey, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And most of all, God doesn't want you to get tired and frustrated of all the different things that are happening in life and just throw your hands up and quit. Because where you place your faith determines how you spend your life. And in your high school years, the habits that you begin to build today, the things that you begin to center your life around, and the way you think about God and what Jesus did for you will begin to shape not only your life in your 20s, but in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s. It'll determine the kind of spouse that you marry. It'll determine the kind of job that you do. It'll determine the kind of grandparent you are one day. And so this is an essential question for you guys to wrestle with today, because it shapes every day moving forward. So in a moment, I'm going to pray. I'm going to send you guys a small group. But I want you to think about one thing, and then I'm going to give you a question, all right? At the beginning, I said, we'll just go with the question. That's great. My bad. That's my bad. I said, when something is yours, it becomes... I messed this up. This is on me. When something is yours, it becomes immediately more important to you than something that is not yours. Today, I want you to ask the faith, is my faith my own? Or am I trying to fake it? Am I trying to borrow it? Am I trying to rent it? Am I trying to pick and choose what I want? Or am I just really getting tired of this whole faith thing and I'm on the verge of disowning it? And if that's you, here's the question I want you to ask. You go to small group today. Grant, my bad, dude. Where are you placing your faith? Because if it's in anything other than in Jesus, if it's in anything other than what God designed for your faith to be in, ultimately it's in something that was never meant to hold your faith up to begin with. So I want you guys to discuss that when you go to small group. But first, I'd love to pray with you. Let's pray.